Hello, and welcome to Pride and Prejudice and Podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Nat Almorel.
And I'm Kurt Halfyard.
And I'm Laura Jane Halfyard.
And last episode, we saw Mr. Collins get married to Charlotte Lucas. The big revelation that Bingley has lost his affection for dear sweet Jane, and ending on the cliffhanger of Darcy's proposal and subsequent rejection by Lizzie. And in this episode, episode 4, aptly titled, we will learn about some of the consequences of that and some surprising revelations about Mr. Darcy's character. So, this episode, I feel like this would be maybe a little bit of a step down in terms of plot developments or fascinating, groundbreaking revelations, but I think this one easily keeps up the pace with the last episode. And it has a lot of ground to lay. I always kind of forget the order of the events, or when Lizzie learns a little bit more about Darcy, when the truth about Wickham is revealed, when what happens with Lydia and her adventures, and I always think of those as happening kind of like separate episodes, but all of it happens in this episode. It's a pretty packed episode.
When this originally aired in Britain, I had originally thought, because it was a miniseries, they would have aired it back to back for a week, but that was not the case. They aired it every Sunday for just over a month, and that would explain actually the beginning. The freeze frame on the previous episode ends with Darcy turning on his heel and walking out the door, and this episode actually begins with the first step out the door. Like, there is less than 1 second between these two episodes. However, the filmmaking here recaps in a very interesting way, so they actually play most of the dialogue again, but instead of it happening like it did at the climax of the previous episode, it's over reaction shots of Darcy to imply that this is going through his head. He's replaying the argument. Then he sits down and starts writing.
It's the same with Elizabeth. They play it over with her as well. They're both ruminating on what was said.
Which is the difference, which we mentioned in this episode, from any of the other characters that just stay, whereas these two are actually thinking about, they're actually, in a small way, growing in this sequence. Darcy commits to writing the letter.
Yeah.
This is the nature of the time, but there's a lot of letter writing and letter reading in Pride and Prejudice, and I must say that there's something deeply satisfying of watching people compose, watching the way people read letters. I mean, it's something that is essentially gone now. It would be like, it's all crass now with people just getting texts or emails, but there is something very classical about watching Darcy keep stabbing the ink with his pen and writing, right? Like, it's and then the way Lizzie curls up that she finds to read those letters or whatnot, because I think the letter in this episode is like the guts of this episode, right? Like, this is it's him writing the letter, and when he's writing the letter, you actually get the whole episode with Darcy's sister and Wickham's courtship with her, and the fact that he almost got away with marrying her on the sly, but she fessed up to Darcy, and he came in, and that's why he punted him. He addressed Jane as much, because the letter's two parts.
He does say that too. He does talk to the whole what his thoughts were with Jane as well, which is good. He addressed both of the charges laid before him, as he states.
Although he stands by, he's got a little bit of, but I stand by what I did with Jane. Like, he's like, my only regret is that there was one time
that he was duplicitous, and that he hid it from being right. But he doesn't regret
that he hid it
making them drift.
No, but he doesn't regret, based on his understanding of Jane, that, hey...
Yeah, his reading. He's like, this was my reading.
And so, good on him for standing by that, of what his thoughts were, right? But Elizabeth does have a deeper understanding of Jane, right? So
you also get Darcy in a university gown and cap, and Wickham getting a little saucy with the co-eds.
Which is fascinating because, wait a minute, wasn't it the shirt in the pond thing?
That's
that was
later.
A bigger thing, but it's the same episode.
No, but like it's much saucier with getting a lap dance
so
with
lap
Wickham.
dance versus swimming in a lake with a shirt on. Anyway, yeah, you're right.
The reason why, and obviously we're going to get to that in this episode because it's a major moment in British television.
Yeah.
But the reason why the Darcy thing is more impactful, obviously, is that collectively Britain was obsessed with the relationship. Darcy just means more. Wickham is this other guy. He doesn't mean as much, so that's why.
Wickham had a lap dance, of course.
Yes, of course Wickham had a lap dance.
Of course.
But I like how dedicated Darcy is in just coming home to write the letter. And they do make a big setup of it where Catherine de Bourgh asks about him, and he's like, no, just tell that old bad.
Tell her whatever.
Yeah.
That is a fist-pumping moment for me.
Yeah.
Anyone that smacks down, the ultimate smackdown of Catherine de Bourgh is not to smack her down to her face, like Lizzie kind of, boldly stands up to her about certain things in conversation, and she's like, don't you have an opinion? No, the real smackdown is to barely even, like, wave your hand as you're running into the bed.
Don't have time to pat.
I don't have time for you right now. That's a big fist-pump moment for me. That's
I mean, we talked about a little bit. I just really like the idea of having a simultaneous dialogue, where, like you said, the characters are replaying what they previously said in their minds and then having their own reaction to it. I know how often has somebody done that, something like that personal, where you're like, oh, I wish I would have said this at that moment, or that this is this into consideration here. And it does so many great things. Like one, it does recap the last episode or the events of the last episode. Two, it's the first time you really get to see into not only Lizzie or Darcy's head or hear their inner monologue, but anyone in this series. Three, it is, like you said, the moment of self-reflection and really taking events into consideration. Darcy is the one who, I think just how quickly he runs home to write that letter, and not really apologizing for the whole station thing. Like, at least he's learned to kind of tiptoe that. But in terms of, I'm going to address these charges that you've laid before me. He's going back to his comfort zone, and here I'm going to lay about the facts, and we can at least keep it. I'll keep my opinions to myself. We'll just deal in something objective, which I'm much better at doing. And I think, too, Lizzie, Jennifer Elliott does a great job, I think, going in that really just fed-up action of, intolerable, or, having her little snide comments in response to his letter.
Let's see what he has to say about this one.
Yeah, exactly. But then, ultimately, it does exactly what he wants it to do in terms of it. She believes his story about Wickham. She's convinced that he's a bad guy, and however much she may dislike Darcy, and this episode is kind of like that reversal of dislike and getting her closer and closer to liking him. But ultimately, for all her snide comments about Darcy, she does believe him, and doesn't do much with that information. They set up that crucial point of her saying, well, I can't tell anyone else because it was told to me confidentially, and he mentions his sister, but she'll tell Jane, of course, but everyone else...
Dear sweet Jane, that's what I said. But Jane has a good opinion in this one, or at least...
Jane's not a gossip.
No, she's not. That's true. But in this one, you were saying before about how Jane's kind of, not so much of a character, or just kind of...
She's a sounding board, to be honest.
Okay, but in this one, she's a good sounding board, and the fact that she's not necessarily throwing judgment, she's kind of wanted to see the good in both of them, which I find fascinating. And even to the point where Elizabeth's saying, no, you can't have... One has the appearance and the other one has all the goodness, right? So...
Mm-hmm. Well, she's defending Darcy against her sister, like the most trusted person in her family outside of her father. And she's defending this guy that all throughout the series she has proclaimed her hatred for.
Mm-hmm.
There's a weird thing when Elizabeth you pointed it out when we were watching it
Uh-oh.
on the weekend. When Elizabeth is reading the letter, she comes to the end of the letter. We've gotten all of the information. It's not a Wilhelm scream, but there is an unplaceable, out of the frame yell in our version that you can hear,
Yeah.
right? And it makes no.
Well, it's like a bird or something.
Like a magpie goes rah! Like, I get it if you're like, making like Caddyshack, like that you would use it as a comedic punctuation. Right. But I'm like, how did they miss that? What is that doing in there? It's subtle, but it's not so subtle. Like, it is. You go, what? Like, did I just hear? It's a double take kind of moment, and it doesn't make any sense.
I never saw that before or heard it before.
It's like the stormtrooper bumping his head. You're never not going to notice and it. Then sorry, Pride and Prejudice faithful. Now you will never unhear the crow in the garden. It doesn't obviously have any, or that we can see or understand significance that you would actually put it in there. And it seems like an odd thing if there was some sort of serendipity, like why you would keep it.
You do hear a lot of background noises. There's a lot of birds and a lot of chirping and things like that you do hear in our version anyway of the in the DVD, which I find fascinating because it's not like it's music where you hear in a lot of movies or
that piano, it comes in. It comes in all the time. Sometimes it's appropriate.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's like, yep, cue up the ivory pounding. Like this, it's like a transitional thing. Like I often praise the filmmaking in this series, but I will admit there's a few clumsy piano cues where they just replay the theme song, which doesn't really mean anything. It's like, we're just filling space here. There's another weird scene before we get to the actual meat of the show, but there's another weird scene in this where they've left Rosings and they're on the post. What do you call it? Like carriage, I guess.
Yeah.
And she's thinking about Darcy, and he appears in front of the carriage like a floaty head. I'm like, what is going on here? And then, like, it's her thinking, but it's pretty clumsy. And then it cuts to the underside of the carriage of the galloping horses, and it's a hard sound cut. And we were arguing. I'm just going to recap because you're like, what the hell is that? When you saw it, and I'm like, well, that's her mind. Her mind is galloping on, but maybe that's too on the nose. But why would you put the matted in floating?
It was a reference to Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Yeah, that's totally. They had to make it back to Longford before the sun goes down. The mail must arrive on time. Actually, they're not even going to Longbourn, right? They're meeting up with Lydia and Kitty in Meryton.
Well, they don't know that, but they're meeting up. Yeah.
Actually, now is that the scene too where it's where Lizzie is riding with Mariah?
Yes.
Yeah.
And they're recapping their events at Rosings, and it's we had 9 dinners at Rosings, which is basically like the early 19th century version of like taking a picture of your food for Instagram.
Yeah. But I feel Lizzie is doing well in the same way that Lizzie's father does this service for anyone within earshot. She's deprecating the pomp and circumstance that everybody else associates. Like, I feel like she's this unconscious tutor of Mariah who's really young and gets really caught up in, like you said, like quoting the stats of, and that's, that's Colin's fault because there's no better, statistician of this sort of thing than Colin.
Okay, but don't forget who her father is, right? That's Sir Lucas, right? So, but there is definitely the two sisters. The two sisters seem to be very, very different.
Yeah, no, but that's fair in the Bennett clan too, right? They're all very different, except for poor Kitty.
But I don't see the age gap between them as much, right? Between Charlotte and Mariah, I'm assuming there's a greater age gap. But
yeah, I'm guessing close to 10 years between.
Yeah.
And the you don't see much of Lady Lucas. I guess you do a bit in the earlier episodes, but Lord Lucas, he's pretty clueless.
By,
he's pretty clueless. Much more enticing on screen is Mr. Gardner and his wife. Who
yes, we should talk with them.
They do an exceptional job of saying, hey, look, these people aren't as rich as the Darcy or Catherine de Bourgh, but they're solid. They don't gossip. They exchange information. They're very classy. Yep. Even if they don't have... Yep. They don't brag. Even though their carriage, there's a sweet ride. That's a sweet ride. Yeah. They're four white horses. Yeah. But yeah, they come to Meryton. Yeah. But before that, Elizabeth hooks up with her sisters in Meryton for the cold plate. Yes. Which they backcharge to her, which I think is hilarious. When
we mean to treat you, but you'll have to pay.
Look, we've treated you to this lovely cold plate, but we have to borrow the money because we spent it all on hats. Hats we don't want.
Hats we're going to destroy.
Well, she flings it. It's a lovely. This is what the book can't do. But the movie, she's talking and she's in mid conversation and she just flings. This is Lydia. Just flings the hat. Oh, I'll do something with it when I get home.
I'm going to take it apart as soon as I get home.
Yeah, you do really want to. I always want to just smack Lydia, but then I always feel pity for Kitty because
she would feel it.
What's that?
She would be the one to feel it. It's like
because Kitty, she's like Lydia's
familiar
shadow. Like she doesn't get to be a full-fledged character herself. Right. She's kind of just there. Yeah. Like I feel like Jane is a distinct character. Elizabeth, of course, is a distinct character.
Mary is too.
Even Mary is. But Kitty, nothing. Yeah. Nothing for Kitty.
I love the dynamic too. Like I do love just giving each sister at least some good screen time, if not good lines in here. And every time Mary speaks, you just feel your heart break, but you can't really like her. So
there's a scene where Lydia smacks down Mary. She's not even present, and Lydia says something derogatory. Kudos to the actress who's playing Lydia because she's very good. She's got the annoying laugh, the everything. She's got it all down. But yeah, clearly as this episode progresses, you learn more, right? With the so they take the.
I want to go to Brighton.
Yeah, they get back to the Bennett household, and then there is the Jane Lizzie. Is that?
Yeah.
Does that happen when they meet, or is it the epic Rose slaughtering of Mrs. Bennett? Like, which one happens next?
Both.
Which one happens first?
It starts with Jane and Elizabeth talking.
So they have
delicately gathering their flowers, and then
Miss Bennett's coming in there. That is some great. Like, I'd love to know who suggested that. It really works.
Because we were joking about this is the only time we've seen Mrs. Bennett do anything.
Miss Bennett. Anybody in the household actually do something functional.
Yeah, that's right. And it's flowers.
Trimming of the flower. Mending. I don't know what you call it.
I think
mangling.
Butchering of the flowers.
And Miss Bennett, she's in there hard. She's in there.
It's also the moment where there's the rift between Lizzie and Mr. Bennett too, where she calls him out and like, okay, you've been, I know we've been a team against Mrs. Bennett for our entire lives, but okay, now there are actually going to be consequences to Lydia going to Brighton, and you need to address this, and you can't have just a cavalier, hands-off attitude.
And he has, and then his response, which I love, is, but I can, because get a meltdown anywhere, we might as well have it not in our company.
Yeah.
Just high five, Mr. Bennett.
And not cost us any money.
And not cost us anything. And besides, we're poor enough that no one's going to be, no one in their right mind would be
take advantage
hunting her because she's worthless. In terms of how many pounds per year.
He wasn't, drink up.
Drink up, yes.
But that shows that he didn't really understand what it would be about or what the risks could be. Forget someone actually trying to marry her. All the other things that she could do to destroy the character, whether it was, go to someone else's bed, run away, all this other stuff.
All of the above.
Yeah, but that
Lydia's down for it. It's all.
Yeah,
she checks all of the above.
Right, but
think of all the balls.
Yeah, Thanks, honey. You're gonna
Hey,
edit
I
that.
just said this. You guys are
Yeah, he's
laughing
gonna edit
about
that.
it.
Okay, but it just shows where his mind is. No one's going to want to marry her versus the reality of is that that's not the worst that could happen, right? That's not your easy answer for everything, right? There's so many other things.
No.
You should be parenting.
It does break my heart that Elizabeth does point out to her father that he's somewhat fucked up in marriage and he's somewhat screwed up in his.
He doesn't point at the marriage.
Patronly,
it's just
duty.
the parenting. Yeah,
like the parenting. Sorry, the parenting. By allowing his daughters out in society too soon, being better with a quip than with an actual hand of discipline. He has his reasons. It's somewhat of a style disagreement, but I think Elizabeth is more right, and it kills me because Mr. Bennet's my hero. So it does kill
I know
me.
he's your hero.
Listen up, Nat. He with a very young child and a daughter, no less.
No, it's a son.
Oh, you're lucky. You're fine. You're fine.
Oh, yeah. So,
neglect away.
I can be Mr. Bennett now.
But I do like at least Mr. Bennett recognizes that, and he says that you should be, what's the word, revered or just liked wherever you go. And it should not be counted against you because you have a couple...
These three train wrecks of his sisters.
Right? So that's good that he recognizes that, but I don't think he understands...
Well, he I like it too when he's saying that. He says two, three sisters.
Yeah, no, again, was it Ben Withorpe, the actor who plays Mr. Bennett he's both of the Bennetts. So
there's another like Seinfeld Naked Gun moment, and I think it's right when Lydia is leaving. And that's what's the line?
Oh no, I'm thinking something else.
Oh, have as much fun as you.
Well, Mrs. Bennett is saying something like, or maybe it's even Kitty who's saying, "Oh, well, she'll never come back," and Mr. Bennett says something to the effect,
"Oh, you'll get over it."
Yeah, you'll get over it. Yeah, which it's like that's
yeah.
The takeaways of the like where the family walks out to the carriage to see off is watching Mrs. Bennett talk, but really watching Kitty in the back. Like, that is Kitty's moment to shine in the background. She gets all the acting as they exchange, think of all the officers and this, and like, Miss Bennett is like super into Lydia's like sowing her wild oats or whatever she's going to do in Brighton. And you just see, and then finally Lizzie does lose it, which leads to the Mr. Bennett comment. But the best thing is the closer on that scene when Lydia gets up to get in the carriage and just face plants into the carriage, which is a great foreshadow for everything that's going to follow that trip. It's a lovely little thing. Again, not in the novel, but it's something that the filmmakers, much like the mangling of the rose garden,
yes,
by Mrs. Bennett, which is a beautiful metaphor. That they're clearly like, these are easy symbols, but it's great that they just, when you deliver dialogue, the actors have to be doing something. If it were a 1940s noir, they'd be smoking cigarettes, right? But here, mangling the rose garden is excellent.
Also, to the gardeners, there is the moment, the exchange between Wickham and Lizzie once she knows his past, which is a nice little more subtle moment in this episode, which has great overt, booming, boisterous moments, and I think also some great subtle dialogue there. And she's ever so discreetly revealing how much she knows of his character without directly stating it.
Her opinion of Mr. Darcy has been elevated in your time apart. That's all one. Is that not all one long tracking walk and talk right across the Longbourn?
No, I think
estate?
it's back and forth because they're at a party with the other.
I think they're at the Phillips. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, the redcoats are there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's a good conversation. But I contrast that, Kurt, when you were mentioning in the episode 2, I believe it's that one when Mr. Wickham and Elizabeth, and you're talking about the close-ups.
Oh, the close-ups, yeah.
Okay, whereas this one, I don't think it's the same.
No, because there's no reveal.
Yeah.
She knows everything.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that's the...
But the one thing I do notice is when he asks about Darcy or mentions something, and she mentions, "Oh, I think he changes his opinion," and he actually head moves back, and I don't know if he actually steps back, but he does step back in the scene,
like he's
as in, yeah. And
the phrase I believe is taken aback.
But I think I don't know if that he has to pause there because his stories aren't in line with that. So now this is new information. So he physically steps back, but he also has to physically, he pauses to try and think of a new line, okay, how do I weave this new information into something that's helpful to me, right?
Well,
you're saying that there's evidence, like framing and video evidence that he's scheming in his head?
Well, that's my thought when he's going back. Whereas before he's leaning in, like, "Hey, I'm telling you this, blah blah blah," and she's taken aback, surprised. But
it's also a mirror of when they have the flashback of him absconding with Darcy's sister, and then Darcy unexpectedly appears. His sister Georgina sees him, and then Darcy or Wickham looks up. Pretty much has the same reaction, but the shot you were talking about though in the second episode, Kurt, they do pull in on Darcy when he's starting to write about Wickham and his experiences with Wickham, like at the beginning of the episode. That they do another pull in during his revelation. So there are some mirrors.
Oh, that's interesting. No, I didn't pick up on that. And watching, I'm thinking we missed a piece of information though. When does Elizabeth about Wickham? Okay, sorry, I'm reading the book and watching the movie at different parts. Sorry, spoiler alert.
Edit that. We'll edit that.
Yeah. Okay. So
But they set up everything pretty much for that in this episode. They set up Wickham's character that he's tried to elope with young women of the appropriate age of 15, at least in 19th century England.
Yeah, well, I actually don't know if that's terribly out of line, to be honest. Like, that's...
Well, maybe not, but the way they deliver the lines, or specifically the way Darcy or Colin Firth delivers the line, she was 15 when he did that. And then also, of course, the whole episode with... Well,
and earlier you heard Elizabeth say, "Oh, no, but my sister, she's just 15, right?" So, yeah. It does give you the impression that 15 is seen as a little bit young at that point, right?
Or at least, like, with Wickham, who's got to be about the same age as Darcy, who's got to be at least close to his 30s. I think he's supposed to be, like, 28 or something like that.
Yeah, that's where I pinpoint them all close to 30,
Yeah.
Considerably older. Not that was ever done in society those days, but I do think that they try to call a little attention to her being a little bit immature.
Yeah.
And in Lydia's case, definitely prove it.
Again, I'll stand by that. I should pull up her name. The actress who plays Lydia, she's really great.
So at the end of that conversation, though, between Wickham and Eliza, is the whole, and you just read the book, so I don't remember it specifically being in the book. The whole, basically, when he walks away, "Go, I would not want you anymore." That kind of, you get that verbal affirmation that Elizabeth is no longer, like, okay, you may have been of interest before, even before you went and chased for that £10,000 a year from Mary King, and then you came back, but now, no, you are gone. And it's nice to have that.
So you're saying
statement.
that the Mary King thing has been introduced?
The Mary King thing has been, yes.
Oh, okay.
You mentioned before Lydia, though, so.
No, I told the story about the Mary King. That's who I was alluding to. So yeah, we have seen that.
Yes.
She's like this red-haired girl with freckles in the series, right?
Yes, with freckles, yeah.
Yeah, so... so it what episode is that in?
So we... Mary King, who she is in the episode before, episode 3, but in this one, when they're sitting down for the cold lunch, is when Lydia
That's what I was alluding
Yes.
to, yes. Okay, so that is this episode.
All right, I thought you were talking about something
call
else,
off
honey.
the spoiler alert.
All right, fine.
Retracted, re-edited back in.
Exactly. Okay, so, and then we're off to Derbyshire, with the gardeners,
Yeah.
who have their cute kids along for the ride.
So very fascinating, and something just for my family to recognize. I don't know if I'm going to take my nieces off on trips. Just saying.
Like on a sightseeing trip around the country?
Yeah, I'm going to drop off my 4 kids and pick up another one? No, I don't think so. Thank you.
Well, that's right. They leave their like young kids at Longbourn.
Yeah.
And then they pick up, like, it's a kid exchange.
I wouldn't mind taking Elizabeth. That's fine. She's a lovely person. But no, if I get a trip around,
What if you could randomly go into, like, strangers' palatial estates?
My niece for this?
We were talking about this. We were talking about this. What a random... We figured that it's acceptable because they're of some wealth and they are neighbors. Like, I still find it strange. I would like either a historical scholar or a Jane Austen scholar to explain to me to just go tour someone's house when they're not at home. Like, it's one thing, ride on the road and you look at Pemberley as you go by.
Yep.
It's another thing to like ring. And Elizabeth there's a like little in-town dinner with the gardeners, and it's all very polite. They although they do get a little gossip or information from their servant. The whole series is that the servants are barely there. Like, the series is all about the rich. Like, even if you're on the lower tier of the rich, like the Bennets, it's still like they have Miss Hall. What's the
Hill?
Miss Hill, yeah. But anyway, so they get a little bit of on the my cousin's a lower gardener at Pemberley. They're not home right now. Why don't you go on over? So over breakfast and they decide, because Elizabeth is very keen that she doesn't want. It would just look extra weird if she just knocked him down in a proposal and then she's going and taking a tour of the house. But she's still curious.
It'd be worse beforehand, but yeah.
The part they didn't show is where she leaves a note in his bed saying, I'm watching you, or I'll be back.
Yeah, and they fire up the old Every Breath You Take by Sting. And boil a bunny. They just work it all.
Is this the Wild edition?
Well, maybe.
Listening to Handel and turning the lights or lighting the candle and blowing it out and lighting it. I do think it may have been a fairly common occurrence out in the country. It's like visiting a museum or something to that effect.
The house is big.
Yeah.
I mean, you see Rosings, and you see the Bennett's house, and you see the Bingley bot.
Yeah.
But when you see Pemberley in a dick swinging contest, Darcy wins this one. Like, that's quite the house. Like, it's impressive.
Are you going to say something about throwing some nice balls?
No.
Okay, good.
No. That would be Gouch and
you're going to edit that, I hope. Okay.
On the Pride and Prejudice show. Anyway, get a nice, and the filmmaking also is very much Rosings or any of the other properties that you've seen. Like,
yeah, but is it because of the forest and the trees around it? Like, I'm just trying to think of some of the angles and stuff. Whereas the Rosings Park just looks like, boom, big estate, almost like a prison. That's just kind of, here's the big building.
Bingo.
Right? Versus Pemberley, which has all these trees.
It's got the rolling hills
and the nice lake and stuff like that. Yeah,
all the good fishing spots.
Yes,
I'm definitely in this episode for the fishing invites. So the gardeners are there. Go down again. They're getting they're not getting the gossip. They don't ask for gossip. They ask for information. I think there is a distinction in.
Yes, they have a polite conversation, and the servant is very interested to share. So.
That's right. She lets the matron, the whatever, the head
housekeeper,
called, and there's a looking at lots of paintings. They wander the halls, which are full of paintings, but they also look at all the little miniatures, and Wickham is still there. Yeah. No one's thought to chuck Wickham out, but. They wander the property. And while they're doing that, Darcy. So there is a fencing lesson with Darcy, which I think is
It's
important.
not in the book, but yeah.
It is important because all of Darcy's body language is he's like, I can't do anything. I can't think. I'm too bothered, but he's still bothered. Like you see it in the fencing, you see it in the...
Yes, he's done the letter. This is the first
he's
time
done the letter. It's the first
yeah.
time you see him. He's still by the whole thing, and then he gallops onto the property, which is in the book. But what isn't in the book is the cold he takes in the pond. That's the big scene. He doesn't fully disrobe.
No,
it's weird. Like, it's weird. In 2016, back to 1995, that this would be shocking. Like this is, or is shocking the right word? Hearts were aflutter. Is that?
Well, I understand hearts flutter. It's the shocking part that I'm more.
Maybe it wasn't shocking. It was just significant.
I mean, you would have nudity on British television at this time.
Of course you would.
Of course.
So it wasn't. It was the context more than the detail. But he does dress down. Like there's
no, he doesn't dress down. He takes it off.
They show him doing it.
Not properly attired. How's that?
Yeah, and I always find the sequence when he wanders up, after he's taken like the underwater shot or whatever, and then he comes wandering in with his clothes in hand and the kind of your shirt.
He's basically dry at that point. But
yeah. I mean, I always find it looks more awkward than it looks.
But it's supposed to be awkward.
Yeah,
right?
because he's now got to be. Well, so how's your folks? Like the awkward conversation.
Here I am, basically, not properly attired, and you're on my property.
So I only found out about the fact that this was significant in the British TV landscape. That scene from watching, documentaries on British TV and things like when I watched Pride and Prejudice, it just went by as and now whoops. Awkward meeting. Like to me, it's far more significant that Elizabeth is like, why am I on his property? And he's like, oh, I'm kind of damp and I'm not properly dressed. And they kind of have to awkwardly make small talk and whatnot. So, and maybe I don't know. I can't put my mind into the headspace of the average BBC One viewer back in 1995.
It's also the rebirth metaphor. Like this is the moment when he becomes a holy person, that he invites them back, and that he has had time for more reflection. That he finally gets to see Elizabeth on a little bit more cordial terms, and I think she with him as well.
Yeah, he proves that it's not Asperger's; it's just inconsideration. The fact that if he wants to.
Or
on
he's
his own doorstep, he can be very
more
polite.
Yeah.
It is his own house, so he's already on the home turf.
But I think before that refusal, I'm not sure if he ever really considered the fact that he was inconsiderate or
no, he didn't.
Polite.
That's what Nat's saying is now visually the jump through the water acts as a metaphor or whatever, but is the point where he's making an effort is probably a way to put it, because you do see it, and the gardeners getting conflicted stories between Elizabeth and the head housekeeper. They see him. He's like, "We should go fishing in the pond. I hope you enjoyed the grounds." And she's like, "No, he's great."
Yeah, and he asked for an introduction as well. Mm-hmm. But the honor. But that's right on the heels, and this is something you didn't say before, when she's there looking at and she says as well, like she's reflecting as well, of all of this, I could have been mistress.
Oh yeah, she gets a rare materialistic moment there for Elizabeth.
But this could have been, I could have been the mistress here. I could have been so that kind of humbleness, or that kind of idea of, wow, maybe I wasn't realizing, what I could have been, what I was turning down at this point. And then he comes in. It's a big house.
It's not long, but it's wide.
Okay. So anyway, he comes in.
How many feet? How many yards wide?
He's at least a half yard.
I think, yeah.
Okay.
In inches.
But he goes back. We're going to edit that.
We're all taking it.
Yeah, it is. There is a lot of algae in that pond. In fact, dives in. The scene where he dives in, fun trivia fact, from the Wikipedia. The scene where he dives in is a stunt double because
him.
The underwater scene is a like a movie studio tank.
Okay.
Because you'd never in a normal pond ever get enough light to film.
Okay.
But the actual scene where he dives in is a stunt double. You don't want your series lead cracking his head on the bottom of the pond and being out. And B, that Cheshire Lime Park, the actual real estate that they used, that pond had like coli or like it had. They didn't want him to get sick from diving in the water, but they'll throw a stuntman under the bus. So yeah, they actually, like, I assume a high chlorine tank of water in the movie studio instead. But yeah, there you go. Little behind the scenes there. Sorry, would you rather the behind the scene trivia?
No, I think we should move on.
Low and crude
Is there another
dick
subject
jokes? Like you pick your poison here.
Is this what you do every week? Okay.
Lizzie's reaction is, again, I could have been mistress of this place, which is
right,
because that's what she found so objectionable in the first line of Darcy's bullet points in his proposal, and now she seems to be a little bit more taken in by it. But yeah, ultimately, I do think it does a pretty effective job of at least. I mean, I always think that Lizzie kind of has an attraction to Darcy from the very beginning, and that continues, and that she sort of denies herself that, just as Darcy does. I know I may be the only person here who believes that, but I do think that she certainly is coming around to this episode, and that is one of the main points of the episode. And Darcy, in turn, is coming around himself in becoming a decent, warm human being.
My take on that would be Lizzie is a very intelligent, self-deprecating, realistic person, but she's not immune to the occasional flight of fantasy, and they allow her to be a better rounded person by going, oh, I could have owned all this. Like, had I, like, that's how I take that.
Or is it a case of, maybe I just didn't see him in the best light before? Yes, maybe he got off on the wrong foot, Now that I really understand what happened between him and Wickham, now that I understand, okay, so yes, I haven't forgiven him for what he did to my sister, but, now when I see him on his home turf and, or the comfort level, maybe this isn't, maybe who I thought he was back then isn't all. Maybe there's more to him.
It's that appreciation of nuance. Like, even if she's not totally convinced, she at least is wise enough to accept that, okay, he may be right in this instance, and he may, like, being willing to grant him those characteristics.
Well, it certainly doesn't hurt having her aunt, who she has a high respect for, right there in her ear. Well, what about this? Well, what about this? Well, this doesn't make sense, but this is fabulous. Having someone that she, has a close kinship and, a close relationship with there, too. I think that's very helpful.
And they put a button on it, too, with Darcy saying back to her that I value your opinion because you give your good opinion so rarely.
Yes.
Ooh, backhanded. Yes. Backhanded compliment.
Yeah, but yeah.
I don't know. I take the whole Pemberley sequence from when she sees him in his whites to his interaction with the Gardners, who, unlike the Bennets, he does actually immediately pick out, oh, these are a better class of people or whatever. But
does he pick that out? Or does he
so.
Just kind of like, no, I have to prove to her that I can be decent?
I think he does because he finds the common ground with Mrs. Gardner when he talks about running to her village and going to the chestnut tree.
Yeah.
But I guess I'm only saying this because it's like really. You're right. It may not be there visually, but it is there, that dialogue. But in the novel, like, they do actually cut to Darcy's point of view, and he does make her. But from Elizabeth's point of view, I think the whole thing is elevated in that just likes to see that he's making an effort. Like, that's a big.
Well, it's a shocker to her,
Yeah, because she smacked him down hard, and now she's like practically trespassing.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And not only that put him in a reasonably awkward position, because there's no reason why he shouldn't be able to take property and not have to make small talk.
Well, and he doesn't even have to come back around again. The head gardener and the housekeeper could have totally taken the guests around, right? He did not have to back out.
Yeah, no. He's clearly like it. This is and with the letter reading and the conversations with Jane and Wickham. You're right. This is the big turning point episode where they consider and I'm after the fishing invitation.
You want to go fishing?
I would. Where is the freeze frame in this episode?
So this is Lizzie's face as she's looking back at Pemberley.
He helps her into the cart.
That's right.
Sorry, the carriage,
and that's
say goodbye. And
that's the point where Laura Jane says, "Let's keep going."
Yes.
Like where it's like, you're. That's so satisfying to see two people, and it's weird. You don't often get this in movies or television. That the climax is mutual respect. Like that's an interesting.
Yeah, they kind of skip that, don't they? Yeah.
Wait, like that's not an idea that's generally it happens obviously in movies and television, but it's not like
it's not as drawn out either, right?
The climax, like that's the freeze frame. Wow, we've got common ground. Click. It's
in a romantic comedy. This would be like the end of the second act where they've broken up, and then you just wait for 20 minutes or a half hour for them to get back together
until he proposes in a soccer stadium.
I mean, he's improved his bullet points. He's got a much better selection.
And here I think it's just, in the earliest of those romantic comedies, it's actually a moment where, okay, let's use it to get to know the characters more and to actually like give them an appreciate or a more nuanced appreciation of each other, which is what your average romantic comedy should do, but doesn't.
And that would be the argument I make why this 1995 version, the 20-plus year test of time, people are still watching it, people are still talking about it, because I can't think of too many other British, American, or otherwise series that would end an episode on that note. And it's a very human, positive note.
But they also have the benefit of a story. But they're also taking the 6 hours to show that story instead of the hour and a half.
Absolutely.
But also, on the whole note of the mutual respect, this whole thing starts and the whole story takes almost a year, right? So
it does, yeah.
A lot of rom-coms now, it's
like a getaway weekend or so-and-so's trip to Ireland or whatever.
Whereas this one gives you the time, but to know the characters. But not just from hey, it's going to be 6 hours, but also hey, we have to deal with, 4 weeks here and 3 weeks here.
Gotta wait for the post.
You have to wait for the post.
So, yeah,
have to wait for them to write the letter.
Yeah, I don't know how this would work, and I think they've attempted it, but I don't know how this works in the day and age of Snapchat.
Yeah. Well, I mean, would anyone wait over a year for that? Started Snapchatting you in September. Would you wait till the next September to pause? Silence. That's a good sign.
No, I'm just thinking that if it's in modern day, Lydia and Kitty would have put the whole plate on credit card.
Yeah.
Sorry, is that relevant?
So after this, you're going to read the next edition, right? You're going to read the.
I am not. I have no interest in the zombies, and I have no interest in the 50 Shades of Pride and Prejudice. So, no, I think I'll stick with the canonical Austen text.
I can't read. I would rather catch up on the Jane Austen novels that I haven't read. So, or reread Pride and Prejudice, because it's been a while since I read that one. But I don't know. We've gone pretty long in this episode. We didn't really talk too much about the second appearance of Catherine de Bourgh. Would be remiss without shouting out again David Bamber's great hand gestures when he's silenced or when he's silencing himself. Mm-hmm. Another nice little smackdown by Lizzie, but it's a packed episode, and
I counted at least. I counted at least 3 uses of the word countenance, which I believe if there's a secondary drinking game, besides about how much people make per year or how much their estates are worth. And this is particularly so in the novel version of Pride and Prejudice. Is Austen had authors have love affairs with certain words, and they may overdo it. Countenance, whoa, countenance, too many uses.
No, I thought you were.
Yeah.
Perhaps, but I should get an electronic version and do some searching just to get the countenance count, and see if it holds up to the dare I say count.
Well, that can be. We can count that for the next 2 episodes, which I can't believe are the last 2 episodes.
But you're absolutely right. Once you get through this episode, the show's at a full gallop now. You wanna like ride the whole home stretch
totally.
of the series.
Well, anything else we want to add for episode 4? I'll take that as a no. So stay tuned for episode 5. But until then, cue the lace.